Reawaken to your immortal identity and discover life between life's wisdom. Presented by the Michael Newton Institute.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Michael Newton Institute's Wisdom podcast series. I thoroughly enjoy hosting this. We have again and again been able to invite, welcome different people from different walks of life from across the globe who come into this series, into these very remarkable heart-to-heart sessions where we discuss, learn, feel inspired and motivated with their stories, their experiences of how they deal with life. But I think one of the most beautiful thread, if I may use that word, that continues is that we have them sharing how they've been able to tap into their own soul's potential, how they've been able to bring in that potent energy they tap into, that awareness into their daily life, into their experiences, and how it has enabled them to grow and to evolve. I have today with us William Beach. William is the managing director of a company. He's based right here in Dubai, a company called Marsh Specialty, which is into energy and power. He's based here in Middle East. I think he's looking after India, Middle East, and Africa. And William is here to share with us his experiences, his knowing, his learning, and how he has been able to find this beautiful balance in his daily life with spiritualism and how corporate, his role as a person in the corporate world, the kind of work he does. But you know what? I'm not going to tell you much. I will actually just invite William to share with us his story, his experiences, his journey. And I'm so happy and so grateful. And thank you so much, William, for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, Indrani. It's a bit bewildering, but I'm excited to share in this format. So yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Well, I'm very, very curious. I'd love to know a little bit about your journey. When I say journey, of course, I'm talking about the journey of life before we delve into the more layered experiences. But I'd love to know who is Will and what's Will's story?
A complex question to start with. I mean, it's hard to answer that question without sort of, it's so natural to just run through the various building blocks of your life from schooling, career, professionally. But so I've been in Dubai for 12 years working for an insurance broking firm. And before that I had got married and worked in London for 5 years. having been to university in the west of England in the UK and schooled in southeast England, but sort of grew up in the UK and a mix between countryside and city living, and so built a life in Dubai. Now with 3 children, and my daughter Penelope, who's 8, and my twin boys Freddie and Vincent, who had just turned 3. And yeah, I think settled into life in Dubai. At each point where I thought I might return back to the UK, some new professional or personal challenge has presented itself, which has either, has been motivation for me to stay put, or has that potentially scared me off moving. There's been a bit of push and pull always to Dubai. But yeah, I sort of work for a fairly fast-paced American corporation, but actually living in Dubai and working in the Dubai office has afforded me a certain amount of sort of freedom within that umbrella of a big American corporation. So I run a team, but it doesn't always feel very corporate. And, it's quite entrepreneurial in outlook, lots of travel around the region. And yeah, a very diverse bunch of individuals, certainly more diverse than my friendship group out here, which is predominantly English. But I've really enjoyed the experience of getting to know other cultures through my profession. And I think, through my wife, Fleur, I have cautiously embarked on a slightly more spiritual part of life, which I was always very, I think, skeptical of growing up. My mum and my sister were quite spiritual in outlook, and I kind of convinced myself it wasn't something that was going to be part of my life until it was inevitable that I couldn't avoid it, sort of thing. But I'm also delighted with the fact that actually, like, having embraced some of that, and we might hopefully get onto some of that it's not really all the path is ahead of me on that perspective. In terms of new stuff I can, explore in the context of career development and professional development, it feels like quite a well-trodden path in terms of lots of people to emulate and follow, and there's the next rung on the corporate ladder. But with a spiritual path, it's like, well, God knows where it'll take you, So yeah, that's a bit about me. I'm not sure if that's what you're looking for, but
no, we're going to keep digging a little deeper and getting to know you a little more. But Will, I'm very curious about one thing. When we talk about boarding school, and I would love to know, how old were you when you went to boarding school?
So I was 7, about to turn 8. So I went to boarding school, in September 1990, and I turned 8 that December. So yeah, just.
So you're really young when you had gone, and I would love to ask you that as you've evolved and as you're evolving, as you said, you've kind of touched upon this realm of your own spiritual experience. And as I say this always, and I always say that we are souls, we've chosen a human existence. And as we keep peeling these layers that cover us, we experience life more. We get to learn a lot more about ourselves. And there are these elements of our own self. That's who I am. What am I experiencing now? And the reason I asked you is, you're a father of 3 children. And there must be a little bit of learning that you go through every single day. And I think each of your children teach you something new about yourself, about themselves, about life, people. And as a parent today, when you look back at your journey and your life, when you went to boarding school, you're a young boy. How was that experience? If you look at it today from the realm as a person who's in touch with his own spiritual self, you're developing an experience of, let me put it this way, Will getting to know Will. It's a relationship between yourself. And in this relationship that you're developing on a daily basis with yourself, I'd be very curious to know, as a father today, what's your take on this whole experience that people go through when they go to boarding school? I'd love to.
Yeah. Well, I think at a very sort of basic level, there's an element of like fear that comes in just when you think about just considering sending a little person to school, because that's obviously what you're thinking about. I mean, aside from your own experience, I look at my daughter who's 8. I couldn't picture her being in the environment that I was in, and I definitely think that being around young children, thinking about schooling, thinking about separation, appropriate levels of how to structure your parenting advice, oversight. I have a sort of slightly worrying tendency, which means I over worry, and therefore when it comes out in parenting, it probably means I'm slightly overprotective. And I think that has definitely just it triggers a little bit more awareness of an experience that perhaps you'd kept in a different place in your mind, around your own experiences being that age. So, and I don't know if the two often go hand in hand, that when someone has kids, it sort of prompts a little bit of an exploration into, actually some stuff that experiences that you'd had as a child, but you hadn't really reconciled with whether or not they were good, bad, different. But certainly the sort of journey that I've been on over the last year has vindicated quite strongly for me that it was quite a traumatic experience being separated from your parents at that age, and amazing how resilient a young person can be in developing mechanisms to cope and to intellectualize and sort of the expression that we say in England was stiff upper lip it, which is stay busy and keep calm and carry on, is the famous poster, right? Which it's got some real truth to it, because actually it's a good way of not dealing with stuff, is that you to sort of busy yourself away. And I think to some extent, developing patterns at that young age, you can use those with quite good effect at university and the corporate world. Some people I see, my friends, family members, still in that mode, and I'm like, maybe they will never have an awakening or have a different element of perspective on their experience, and good for them. I certainly now living with a slightly different relationship to that experience than I did just 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I was always sort of slightly conscious that it was a tough age, a young age to go away to school at, but I sort of put it to bed with the fact, well, yeah, but all my friends did it and they're fine. And, this person has had a much worse experience, or this person had a bereavement at that age, or, there was always a comparison with someone else to completely squash any validation for yourself. So, yeah, but that's just, I think, functions of that sort of separation. Not necessarily separation of me from my parents, but separation of the reality of the experience, that you can distance yourself from an experience to protect yourself from it, right? I do that now in the corporate world. Like, if I care less about my task that I've got to do, if I care less about a particular strategy, it's a self-preservation thing, that you not care so much that you won't get disappointed if it doesn't go right. And it has some merit sometimes holding it light, but I don't think there's much merit in holding childhood experiences lightly for a long time. But yeah, it was a now I feel like at least I have a relationship with that experience, whereas before it was almost something that happened to me. I feel like I have some agency in it now, or gaining some agency in it now. And being a bit more authentic about the response. When people ask me how was the experience, I constantly told my mother that it was fine, don't worry about it. And now I have the power to tell her it wasn't fine and I didn't enjoy it, or this bit wasn't okay. And that's quite empowering.
How do you take this very empowering experience? Because you said something very interesting. It's the word authenticity. Because when you accept that, okay, I've gone through the experience, but I'm okay to say that it wasn't as good as it could have been made out to be, or you had moments or experiences in that time of your life, which you're probably addressing now as an adult. You know, in our realm of work, we call it inner child healing, where you go and literally speak to that little part of yourself. And you try and understand that as an adult of the here and now, what is it that my little self went through, or that young me went through at that time, which I may not have had the bandwidth or the power or the courage to understand or accept. And you kind of just, you know, park it somewhere on the side. It's just sitting in the shadow, and then it keeps popping up. And it looks like you're talking to that part of yourself. And, you know, this brings me to my next question, which would be that this acknowledgement of yourself, acknowledgement of that authenticity within you, where you're probably acknowledging certain emotions or certain aspects of yourself, which you're probably now speaking with or talking to. How does that carry forward in your life today? How do you take that learning or that awareness or that wisdom or that I would maybe call a sort of spiritual awakening? How are you bringing that into your daily life today? How does it impact maybe your home life, your workspace, your colleagues, the team that reports to you? How does it work?
Well, I think at the outset, I'd say that it's, you know, it's not something that's ever really particularly fixed. I feel like as the months and days go by, I've got, you know, not necessarily a different perspective from day to day, week to week, but certainly I can see that it feels dynamic in terms of how I'm. As in, it still feels like a lived experience, if you see what I mean. It's not something that I've learned and now I've got this toolkit and I'm off delivering it. It's that is my very logical brain thinking about how potentially it could be, but I still feel like there's more conversations to be had, and actually really enjoy the process of considering that there's, you know, I guess I put it down to a similar way of, you know, I go to the gym and you look after your physical health. From a mental health perspective, I think that practicing that element of whether it's inner child or something that gives you the space for spirituality can always yield, even if there's no more, even though, you know, been to the boarding school experience so many times, I still think that you know, it might be what happened yesterday is something that is worth thinking about for how you can use it in the future. But so long-winded context there, but I think one of the things that I've really learned is that not to deal in binary concepts. From, you know, there is no good and bad and right and wrong, and that's been really rewarding in a personal sense, because, you know, like, it helps me set expectations when I'm parenting and when I'm dealing with a colleague or a complex situation at work, is that if you go into it always seeking a solution or a outcome that is positive, you know, you miss all the little bits. The process itself can have loads of positives, even if the outcome is not really what you wanted. And similar with parenting, you know, it's very easy to set the bar so high or have expectations of how you should be engaging with your wife or your children, and it's so easy for that to go awry because, well, you know, guess what, your kids don't have the same expectations you do, and there's hormones and emotions and all this sort of stuff. So I think you know, the elements of spiritual awakening or you know, sort of getting to know some of that side of me has helped set myself up. You know, the outcomes might be similar, but my positioning versus the outcomes is no longer one of angst or anger or fear. It's more of acceptance. And I just, sometimes it's something you have to physically practice, you know. And I find myself doing it with the kids. It's like, you know, I'll get a little bit angry with something, that something's happened, and I'll be very quick now through practice to catch it and say, oh, hang on a minute, why did I react angrily to that? And, you know, I can take a few breaths and I can think, well, actually, maybe it was something that happened at work. And I think we were talking previously about, you know, the day I did budgeting at work. Well, guess what? I was slightly short-tempered in the evening, but previously I'd have let that roll and it would escalate and it would become a big thing. And actually, I was very, well, relatively quickly able to just take some acceptance from the fact that actually it was a stressful day. I work in a big corporate environment. There are strains and stresses. It could have consequences. You know, take some deep breaths, do something positive for yourself, or even just, you know, verbalizing that that's what you've just noticed has a really stabilizing effect on your reaction to any further inputs, you know. So I think that's one of the big things I've noticed is it's not quite staying grounded, because staying grounded, I think, for me is a bit more of a state of zen that I currently can't ever hope to achieve with a busy household like I've got. But I certainly think that, like, just being able to, as I said, not deal in these binary concepts means that you're, you know, able or just feel a bit more comfortable sitting in discomfort sometimes, or, you know, if a certain meal time just goes completely doolally because the kids, or a certain meeting doesn't go how you planned, that you've not staked your whole well-being that day on the outcome of that, as so many people do, you know.